We are currently seeing a big downward shift in the Southern California housing market that's resulting in a massive spike in inventory. And yes, home values are now officially dropping in Southern California on a month-over-month basis. The question is, how much worse is this correction going to get, and how much are these prices going to drop in 2025 and 2026? And when I talk Southern California, everyone, I'm talking three counties: Los Angeles County, Orange County, and San Diego County. And you can see in all of them, home values declined on a month-over-month basis in April, according to data from Zillow. This was actually a big shock, especially for Orange County, because over the last year, values in Orange County are actually still up 6.4%, and they're still positive year over year in most of these areas in Southern California. However, that's not going to last for much longer because the inventory metrics are absolutely exploding. In Los Angeles County, inventory is up 47% year over year. In Orange County, inventory is up 79% year over year. And in San Diego County, inventory is up 66% year over year. And when you see the inventory go up this fast, everyone, it's a signal that your market is correcting, which is ultimately good news if you're a prospective buyer in Southern California. We could finally be on the doorstep of much needed price relief. The issue, however, is that prices are extremely high. They've gone up a lot over the last decade. They've gone up a lot over the last 3 or 4 years. And as a result, many local home buyers in Southern California are priced out and simply can't even qualify for a mortgage to buy a house. The result is, everyone, a big reduction in home buyer demand. And I want you all to pay attention to the data I'm about to show you. In particular, in an area like Orange County, the home sale transactions are down almost 45% from their pandemic peak. And you can see the home sale volume is down about 24% from the long-term average in Orange County. So a big reduction in demand there. If we go down to San Diego, there was 2,300 home sales in April 2025. While this has recovered a bit over the last couple of years, it's also about 25% below the long-term average. And you can see it's much the same in Los Angeles. Really low buyer demand. And it was interesting, for a couple of years, this low buyer demand wasn't obvious on the market because the inventory was low. And because inventory was low, it still seemed like there was strong demand. There were still bidding wars, and values in a place like Orange County especially went up as much as 7-8% over the last year. However, the calculus is now changing because we're starting to see sellers finally come to the market in Southern California. That's the big difference so far in 2025. More and more sellers are now finally listing their homes. Maybe they've just waited long enough. Maybe the mortgage rate lock-in effect is easing. Maybe there's some local economic issues cropping up in Southern California's economy and housing market that are now pushing some of these sellers onto the market. And that's what's causing the inventory to really skyrocket. And so I just want to draw a parallel here. So, 3 years ago, Southern California's housing market went through a mini correction. I don't know if you guys remember this, but in the second half of 2022, prices did drop by about 5 to 10% in Southern California over about a 9-month period into early 2023. The prices then recovered and continued to go up until about 3 or 4 months ago. Now they're starting to go down again. And I have a feeling that this is probably going to be that's probably the last gasp, the last year and a half of price appreciation in California. I think finally the jig is up in terms of this market finally slipping into correction. The question is just how much could these values drop? So I want you to take a look, folks, at what's going on in a place like Orange County, which I know is an area a lot of you are interested in. So you can see Orange County home values are now up to 1.1 million for the typical house. That's not even, a nice house. That's just the standard house, maybe 1,600 square feet, small lot. You got to pay 1.1 million. Orange County. Now, the previous peak was in 2022 at $1 million. It dropped down to about 990,000 and then picked back up. And you can see this marks basically almost 13 years in a row, more or less, that values have continued to go up in Orange County. It's been a long bull run in this housing market, and the question is, I just wonder, is this bull run about to run out? Because if we look at the affordability metrics in Orange County, we could see the mortgage payment to income ratio is now up to 80%, meaning that the typical household would need to spend 80% of their income to buy a house with a mortgage. which means quite clearly that very few local people are buying houses with mortgages. The long-term average is 49%, and prior to the pandemic, you could buy a house around 38% of income in Orange County. So this has always been an expensive market compared to other areas, but at least prior to the pandemic, you could still actually afford to buy a house here, despite it being expensive. Now that is just simply no longer the case. People cannot qualify for homes here. You could see the last time the affordability was as bad was the 2006 bubble, and that 2006 bubble eventually gave way to a massive crash. San Diego is much the same. The mortgage payment to income ratio in San Diego is 69%. And again, I want you guys to think about that. If you buy a house with a mortgage in San Diego, your payment's going to be $74,000 a year on average, or around $6,000 a month. That's 69% of the area's median income, which is an above average median income. However, it's not high enough to support these prices. In mortgage rates, the long-term average in San Diego is a 46% mortgage payment to income ratio. And so if some of you want some type of, metric to help you understand how overvalued is the market today, and what would be the threshold that we would need to cross for the market to actually rebound in terms of demand, I think it's this graph. So long as the mortgage payment to income is up in this 60 to 70% range, we are going to see frozen demand on the San Diego County housing market, and we're not going to see demand return until the mortgage payment to income ratio drops down to a more normal level. Now, the data I've been showing you so far in this video is using a program called Reventure App, which I developed to help you as a home buyer investor track the housing market and actually forecast where prices are heading. And at the end of this video, I'm going to show you how you can use this application to help yourself as a buyer and investor save money on your real estate purchase in 2025 or 2026. But first, I want to actually look at some listings on Zillow so you guys can all see how crazy this Southern California housing market is. Now, right now we're looking in Orange County, which is really expensive. Orange County is as expensive now as San Francisco in terms of buying houses. And you can see there are more price cuts showing up on the market. For instance, this is a house with a $150,000 price cut down to $1.2 million. It's a 4-bed, 3-bath. You can see it's pretty old, built in 1950, has not been renovated in quite some time. Look at that kitchen. Now you can see the Zillow value estimate for this house peaked at $1.2 million in 2022, went down, went back up, and now the seller is cutting it to, let's just call it a more reasonable level, but still a very expensive level. The Zestimate is up 82% in the last 10 years. And if you were to buy this house with a mortgage, let's see here, Zillow isn't even giving the estimated payment. We got to go down a little further. Am I wrong here, folks? Did Zillow remove their estimated payment calculator? Oh no, here you go. Calculate monthly payments, see if you can afford this home. Not letting me click it. Let's just do some back of the envelope math. 1.2 million. If you were to buy this house with $1 million mortgage and 200,000 down, that mortgage would probably cost you about around $8,000 a month if you include your taxes and insurance, which would be around $96,000 a year. Oof, who has $96,000 a year to spend on a house like this? Now, if we go to this house's zip code, you can actually see Reventure App has a positive price forecast for this zip code. So we think prices are actually going to go up 4% in the next year in this zip code. Our score is a 54 out of 100. This is an area that's basically stayed in a seller's market over the last 4 or 5 years, hasn't really slowed down too much since the pandemic. However, if we look further out on this map, you can see there's a bunch of zip codes that we have downward forecasts now throughout Orange County, also going up into Los Angeles especially. We're seeing some pretty heavy downward forecasts actually in certain areas of Los Angeles. Now, how about if we move down to San Diego? Because I know a lot of you guys are also down in San Diego looking to buy. And you can see we also got some price cuts here popping up here north of San Diego in Escondido, a $21,000 price cut on this $1.2 million house. Now, this is definitely a nicer $1.2 million house than the one we just looked at before. However, still very, very expensive. You can see the Zillow value estimate peaked in 2022, went down a bit, recovered, and is still really, really high. The owner of this house actually bought it for $642,000 in 2016. So they are making a killing. They increased it to 83%, and then they actually increased the price even more in April and then cut it. So some of these sellers are still really greedy. I mean, increasing the price 83%, delisting it, and then in April listing it again at a higher price. price. It's like, come on, like how much money do you really need to make on your sale? We can see here in this zip code, 92026, our forecast has actually turned negative. So we have a negative forecast now in some of these northern suburbs of San Diego. You can see up until a year ago, our forecast was positive. We saw that the prices were going to keep going up. Now we're saying the prices are going to go down. When you guys go on Reventure App and look at this home price forecast score, I want you to look at a couple things. One is what our 1-year forecast is. So in this zip code, our 1-year forecast is minus 0.9%. So it's marking the beginning of a correction. We don't see a crash playing out imminently, but we see downward price pressure. But what I want you to do is look at the home price forecast graph, change it to monthly view, and you can see, how the market is trending in real time. Up until the end of 2024, our forecast was positive. Then it really took a nosedive to start this year. And so you're going to want to track this forecast into the future to see if your area is continuing to go down. So if it's continuing to go down in terms of this forecast, we could see more price declines in the future. Now, how about if we go up to Los Angeles? LA is a market where we're actually seeing declining values in a lot of different areas. Particularly if you go near Hollywood, Beverly Hills, down to Venice Beach, values are dropping in a lot of locations. You can see we got some price cuts. $27,000 on a $1.2 million house that's 1,400 square feet. Folks, this is $830 a foot in terms of affording this house here in Los Angeles. You can see it's been on the market 100 days, only has 11 saved. You can bet it is overpriced. The Zillow estimate was $985,000. They tried to list it for 1.3. They're cutting it. They're going to be cutting it by more. If we go to this zip code, 90018 in LA, Jefferson Park, you can see we got a heavy downward forecast. We think prices in this area are going to drop 5.6% over the next year. And you can see this price forecast score is plummeting, folks. So, when you look at this price forecast, you look at it historically. Where was our price forecast? It was always above 50 out of 100 in this zip code through 2022. Then we went to kind of 42, 46, which is like a modest maybe slowdown, maybe prices start to drop. Now we're at a 33. When we're at a 33 on the Reventure score, that's telling you, warning, warning, something big is happening. One reason why, look at the inventory of homes for sale in this zip code. It went from 26 a year ago to 47 today. That's telling you downward price pressure. That seller who I just showed you on that Zillow listing, I guarantee you they're not looking at this data, because if they were looking at this data, they would know to price their house more reasonably and to anticipate the decline that's coming. So there's really two metrics I would encourage you guys to look at if you're a potential buyer or seller or realtor in the Southern California market, so you can understand where it's heading in the future. These metrics, they're going to really help you dial in on what's going on in your city and zip code, because this market's super volatile right now. You're going to want to understand what's happening. The first metric is our home price forecast. It's a 12-month forecast looking at the underlying supply and demand fundamentals. This forecast is going to give you an idea of where values are heading over the next year and help inform your strategy as a buyer or a seller. If we have a downward forecast, as a buyer, it allows you to be pickier, take more time, submit lower offers in markets that have downward forecasts. Whereas if you're a seller, be more realistic. If you're listing your home, the market's trending down. Meanwhile, if your area has an upward forecast, certain areas still in Orange County have an upward forecast, we think that there still could be bidding wars in areas that have upward forecasts, and values could increase more into the future. The other metric you're going to want to look at is the overvaluation rate. How over or undervalued are prices in your city and zip code? You can see there's some big differences. In certain pockets of LA, values are now undervalued from their long-term norms. Meanwhile, other pockets are significantly overvalued. And so the more overvalued that prices are, here in this zip code, prices are 30% overvalued, you're going to want to be careful buying because there's more risk inherent with buying. Whereas if you buy in an undervalued market in blue with a negative in front of the overvaluation rate, so you're going to have more security in your investment in the long run. Even if prices drop in the next year, they're unlikely to crash by a large amount, given that the valuation metrics are already good. So head to www.reventure.app to track the data in your market in Southern California, particularly the price forecast and the overvaluation rate, available under a premium plan for $39 a month.